when they come to me, the chain is they've already had an episode of it for whatever reason. They've had one. And then they end up having another and they think there's something wrong with me.
Hey, it's Brad. And boy, am I happy you're here. If this is your first time, I'm really glad you found us. You're not going to be disappointed. And if you've been here before, welcome back. This is Pain to Performance. Let's jump into today's conversation. Here's something nobody wants to talk about, but everyone needs to hear. We spend so much time talking about performance and productivity and mindset, and all of that matters. But there is a whole side of health that people they suffer through it in silence. And it's wrecking their confidence, their relationships, and ultimately their quality of life. Guys, I'm talking about sexual health. And specifically, I'm talking about what happens when sex just disappears from your life. Not because you chose it, but because something in your body or your mind or your past made that decision for you. Erectile dysfunction alone affects tens of millions of men. But here's the part nobody talks about. It is not just a physical problem. When sex goes missing, everything around it starts to shift. Your confidence changes. The way you show up in your relationship changes. The story you tell yourself about who you are as a man, as a partner, as a person, that story starts to rewrite itself entirely. And most people deal with it by pretending it's just not happening. And if you're a veteran or you love someone who served, there is an extra layer to every bit of that. Because trauma does not just live in your head. It shows up in your body. And the system that is supposed to take care of you after service has some serious blind spots when it comes to this stuff. So today, I'm sitting down with Mark Prevet. Mark is a licensed professional counselor, a certified sex therapist, and a trauma specialist who works directly with veteran populations. And the stuff he's going to share today is the kind of thing that changes how you think about recovery, about intimacy, and about what it actually means to heal. So stay with me. This is going to be one of those conversations that sticks with you. Mark, welcome to Pain to Performance. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and talk to y'all.
I'm so excited for today's conversation. I think it's just going to be one that is for the books. I've told so many people, guys, I'm having a sex therapist on, and they're like, wait, what? What does that mean? I said, you're just going to have to listen. And I'm really excited to be able to actually get this conversation with you today. We've talked quite a bit already, and now I'm just even more excited to really dive into all of the things that we have to discuss today.
Sounds like a plan.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So before we get into the clinical side of things, I want the listener to know the human behind the credentials, right? So we know you're a licensed professional counselor, a certified sex therapist, a trauma specialist. That's a really specific path, right? So what pulled you towards this work, and how did you end up becoming a sex therapist?
It's really interesting. So I knew I wanted to be a therapist. And when I started a long time ago, originally it was what got me into therapy and psychology was I wanted, back in the 90s, wanted to work at SeaWorld, and you had to have some aspect of marine biology with psychology. And then I couldn't stay in school during that time period, then joined the military, got hurt, came out of the military, and then after I went back to college. And so I just stayed in the therapy field. It was during my internship for my master's, and I was originally working towards working with traumatic brain injuries and dementias, so things that were physically going on wrong with the brain itself. It wasn't until I was done that I found out at the time professional counselors could not take Medicare. And since that was one of the things I wanted to do, I couldn't do that. But what got me into sex therapy was when I was working at the hospital, that's when I learned that the geriatric population was one of the fastest growing sexually transmitted infection groups. And it was one of those things. It's because it usually was like a 6-to-1 ratio at that time, where it was like every 6 women to 1 male, and then they would
Wow.
pass everything around, and so that's what got me into that aspect of it, was dealing with that specific population. And I do like still working with that group, but it opened the door. And then I started learning about sex therapy and how expansive it really is. It's not just what most people think it is.
Hmm. Well, I think that's incredibly fascinating. I did not think that that type of statistic would be out there. that's wild. But I love it even more because what you're really saying is this work found you, right? You're saying that it kind of found it came forward, shined a light on its head, and it says, "Hey, I'm here." So it was not some abstract career decision. Something in your experience showed you that people need help in this space, and nobody was showing up for that. So what an absolutely just really cool way to kind of get started into that. So I'm really interested to kind of dive into a little bit of your practice. I know are you working just with geriatric at this point, or are you seeing everybody now?
So when I started, this journey, this was before COVID, and this was before telehealth and that aspect. And so when I was working on this journey, the element of being the one of the few people who were certified or had specific training in sexual health issues and uh, and aspects with mental health. Once I got my certification, I was the only certified sex therapist in the whole state outside of the greater Atlanta area.
Ooh.
So, yeah, it's now
Talk
expanded,
about
especially with
cornering
the
a market. That's crazy. That's a
yeah,
lot.
it was a challenge. I will say it was a
Sure.
challenge. Uh, and I would have people drive 2 hours one way to come and talk to me, and uh, and I would speak with a lot of like universities and doctors' office. A lot of my work now is I like working with the medical field, because especially with some of the things, there's the organic piece and then there's the functional piece. So we have what's going on body itself, and then what's going on in our head. I can help with the head. Can't
Sure.
really always help with
Huh.
the body.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that's not your specialty, right? Your specialty is the mind, the brain, the things that are happening there. So
Mhm.
let us get into what you actually see in practice then. So when somebody comes to you, whether it's a veteran, male, female, non-binary, whatever it may be, comes to you, what are they usually dealing with? Like, what does that first conversation typically look like?
So the main element I normally see is some form of when they reach out to me, there is something that it's just not fitting right. Sometimes they know that it's like I might have a desire discrepancy, or it might be something where I've seen my doctor and with like erectile dysfunction, and they're like going, "Well, we put you on these medications and none of it's working. You need to go see somebody about this." And that's another reason why I like to work with their prescribers, is because then I can kind of see it. So the majority of what I typically get in my practice is normally dealing with someone who's already worked with a medical provider and they have done as much as they can. The next one that would probably follow up with that would be because one of their partners is saying, "Hey, we need to have some type of help here, or I'm noticing these aspects." And I think it would be better if you spoke to someone about that aspect. So that's what
Hmm.
I see more often than not. There's always exceptions to the rules, but those are the two major categories I get.
Interesting. So it sounds really complex, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not just this one situation that brings somebody in. It's multiple. It's something that really has been building. So when we talk about maybe trauma, people think nightmares, flashbacks, right? PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, right? But what you're saying is it shows up in the bedroom too, right? It shows up in intimacy. Can you walk us through how that connection actually works?
Yeah. So if we're looking at the element where we're having trauma, some type of trauma, whether that is through abuse or neglect when they were adolescent, or if we're looking at the VA, the veteran population itself, when we look at what they might have been exposed to either overseas or even a lot of the stuff happens stateside as well, depending on
Mm,
many, so many different aspects. But when we look at that trauma or the anxiety elements that come to this, it can manifest. Prior to being a therapist, I was a computer programmer, and I just view the human brain as an amalgam of hardware and software.
okay.
Because we have these structures that come and exist in there, that predetermined path is sometimes predetermined is once that is been established, sometimes we have to kind of shift it because if we look at our coping skills keep us alive.
Mm,
We wouldn't develop a coping strategy if it wasn't successful.
sure.
And at some point, it becomes maladaptive or it doesn't work the way it needs to. And that can manifest in many different ways. So if we look at sex itself, sex is one of the most vulnerable things we can do. And if you're already having some type of uh, anxiety issue or trauma issue, that can easily, I mean, we're looking at skills that keep us alive, to keep us safe. And then we're doing something that's very vulnerable putting. And then
Hmm.
it can short the system out a little, which makes sense in a lot of
That's
ways.
really It's really interesting that you say that. So let's talk about high performers for a minute, right? I talk about high performers on my show a lot. And the reason why is because high performers tend to carry a really big stress load. They tend to carry a lot of things. So let's talk about an individual that might be carrying a lot of issues or just a lot of responsibility, excuse me. Not issues, responsibility. So they're carrying a lot of responsibility. So I think what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm incorrect here, is that that person that's carrying a lot of responsibilities that has a high amount of stress that's almost kind of like trauma for the body in a way, and it they have coping mechanisms that are keeping them alive, whether that be maybe having to completely turn off their ability to care for their partner, or maybe their body does it for them, and i.e. erectile dysfunction, or maybe something along the lines of maybe vaginal dryness or something of that sort, right? So it can be everything from psychological to the body actually saying, hey, I can't do this. So now we're talking about the mind body connection, and we talk about this a lot in my show, and I love to bring it up every time because that really is what allows us to be able to go from pain to performance, is understanding how those systems actually work together. So I think what really stuck out to me here with what you said was that the nervous system can potentially get stuck. It gets stuck and it just halts. And whether that could be from, let's say, a veteran combat or somebody individually assault, it could be even just a high stress load. And that same wiring is what controls arousal and connection. Is that right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. Trauma is one aspect, and then we have anxiety that's another. So we have situations that can be stressful that are not necessarily traumatic. So we want to
Interesting.
make sure
Okay.
that we understand that trauma is one aspect, but a lot of what I see has less, not always dealing with trauma, has a lot to do with anxiety. And then like these self-fulfilling prophecies or this constant
Mhm.
comparison aspect. Then when we
Yes.
look at those other factors of there has been neglect or assault or some other aspect of even with injury, if we're looking at just general injury as well, whether we're looking at urogenital trauma from combat or a car accident or we fell down
Interesting.
a flight of steps kind of deal. So yes, there's a lot of different factors. And then what sometimes gets the ball rolling is we have like one episode of either erectile dysfunction or vaginismus or premature ejaculation or some form of uh, climax issue. Right? Then that can come
Interesting.
from many different aspects. Like a lot of medications can
Mhm.
also cause um, arousal issues or orgasm issues or factor. That's another reason why I
Interesting.
like working with the providers and
Of
medical providers
course. Yeah, and this
is
like you really actually understand this thing called the mind body connection, and I love that. And I want to stay on that for a minute because I think this is where it gets really real for a lot of people. So let us talk about erectile dysfunction specifically. Okay, so a guy's dealing with ED. Maybe it started after they had this new project that came in that they're like, holy crap, I can't handle this, but I know I have to do it. Or maybe there was some major life event that happened. Or maybe, like you said, they fell down the stairs. Or maybe there's something that's happened. So what is actually happening in this individual's body and their brain? And what is the ripple effect of that in their life specifically that you have seen?
okay. Uh, I mean, there's been so many. The typically the way when they come to me, the chain is they've already had an episode of it for whatever reason. They've had one, and then they end up having another, and they think there's something wrong with me, not acknowledging everything that might be on their plate, not recognizing that there might be other factors involved. Because, especially with a lot of the stuff that we are subjected to, not only within media, but the way we talk back and forth within the military culture, because I'm also a disabled veteran. So I'm third generation military. So I'm very much exposed to, prior to being a therapist, to these aspects.
Sure.
But this very strong, we have to get through it head first kind of mentality. Once we start having these concepts where I'm less than, whatever it is, even if it's not
Mm,
true, if we start believing it's true, then we start thinking there's something wrong with me. Instead of giving themselves an ounce of patience, and then it kind of steamrolls over that. Um, and it can happen. I could not just throw one dart and tell you where it's at, because I have literally seen hundreds of different presentations of this, even when I'm supervising because I supervise both licensure and for certification. And when I'm working with these supervisees, specifically hearing some of their things, and I'm like, okay, especially with new people, new therapists, they can unintentionally go down one rabbit hole, and it's like, oh,
mm,
pump the brakes, let them go here a little. I also see a lot with some medical providers too. They won't want to talk about it, which here you have a patient coming to you and wants to talk to you about it, and then you don't want. I get that a lot too. You need to go talk to Mark
sure.
about it. Yeah.
Of
So
course. And that's something
multiple
that
trauma.
I think that's something that's really interesting as well. And there's something for me that I think most people in my life understand is I'm a very sex positive person. I think that the moment that we start to put subjects as taboo is the moment that we stop talking about them, and it creates anxiety, it creates secrecy, it creates all of these things that just create a huge problem. And what you just said is a perpetuation of that. And so what is it that people can do to try to break this perpetuation of tabooness of talking about sex or just their themselves in general, even if it's not sex, themselves and their issues?
It really matters where the message is coming from. The If it's coming from them themselves, the first thing I usually try to walk them through is giving themselves just like an ounce of grace to themselves, like giving themselves permission to say, you know, I'm not really happy with myself right now. And like, okay, well, being unhappy means that we can work on it, but having that ounce of grace means that we give ourselves permission to not be perfect, And then it might be from, let's say it's coming from a provider. The number of providers I've reached out to or talked to, and they don't want to talk about sex. Here you have, there's a few people I've worked with in the past, not as clients, but doing supervision, where they, the medical provider, they are literally working on the area that is involved in what sexual practice is, whether the genitals themselves. And they will say, I don't want to talk about it. Here a person's coming to you for an issue, and here you are, a medical doctor, or physician's assistant, or whatever. And they're like, no, that's not what we're talking about. And then I've had people come and go, what's wrong with me?
Oh.
Here's a person I'm talking to, and they won't even talk to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come to
Oh.
me, and it's like,
Now they have like an additional thing to talk about, like now they've almost been shamed for it. And I mean, honestly, Mark, the type of work that you do is life-changing for people. And I think what I'm hearing is that it's just this feedback loop of stuff that keeps happening. And there's almost kind of like a negative reinforcement that's coming with it. And so, like, let's go back to our original example of this gentleman that's come to see you for erectile dysfunction, right? The guy already feels like he's falling short. He feels like he's failing. So naturally, what do we do in our lives, right? We start to pull away from the things that we're failing at because nobody likes to fail at them. And then that makes the partner feel some type of way. So let's talk about the partner for a minute,
okay,
because it's not just a solo experience issues with these types of things, right? Let's talk about when sex disappears from a relationship. It's not just one person feeling it, at least not normally, right? So what do you see happen to the relationship itself when it goes unaddressed?
oh, that's a good one, because that's, once again, this is not a one and done one, because each relationship is different. Each dynamic is different. If the person who's having some form of sexual dysfunction, if the partner is very supportive and present and everything, it tends to help in that.
Hmm. What does
The
that
other
look
thing,
like, Mark?
so like if we're talking specifically about erectile dysfunction, it's that it's okay, you know, I get you're having a hard time and this is not helping. So let's not worry about whether or not you can have an erection or not. Or uh, maybe, arousal disorders come in many different flavors. We're looking at vaginismus, or sometimes when we look at vaginal dryness aspects, because hormonal shift. Same thing can happen with men with hormonal shifts as well, especially as we get older. That can open up a whole different ballgame. But just having that presence, that partner being it, it's yes, I like this aspect of our lives together, but it's not the only thing that's in our lives together. By just
Hmm.
taking some of that pressure off. The other is because sometimes, even if I'm seeing someone individually, every now and then it's okay, like, to get the other person's perspective, so they might bring their partner in and I always make this kind of, it's always for the benefit of who's my identified client. I don't go from like individual to couple. That's not in my mind, and a lot of colleagues, it's not an ethical framework from going one to
Sure.
couple. It's just not
Makes
that way.
sense.
Um, but with that mindset of, this is me getting collateral information from someone who's being involved in the process. And then I usually, if I see something or I hear something, I usually then try to work with another therapist who does their couples work. And I do the individual, if that's, or vice versa. If I've already done their couples, I usually then want to talk to their other therapist. For one big one is so we don't step on each other's toes, but also is clarification of uh, what is needed for like erectile dysfunction. What is it that we're seeing or hearing? So that's where that partner piece can come in.
Interesting.
patience, a little bit of just the acceptance aspect of saying, okay, I know we're both going through a rough time, but I'm not going to try to shame you and I don't want you shaming me.
Interesting. So it sounds like what you're saying is in those moments, we fall back on the other pieces of the relationship that are bolstering everything else. And that's how it is that we can show up and support. Is saying, yes, I understand that you're having this problem. And I understand it's affecting me also. But we are in this together. We are going to get through it. It's just we just got to find the map to do so. What a really good way of saying that your relationship isn't over because you feel like you're not sexually desired. And I feel like that can be a lot of issues for a lot of people, is feeling that they don't feel desired in that way by their partner. Or maybe they do think that they're being desired, but nothing's happening. Right? So they're like, are they lying to me? And it creates all these additional questions and concerns and all of this other stuff that comes forward. So I think what you just said was we need to make sure that we come, what you said is that we came forward with support and
Mhm.
understanding and being able to really and to be able to give grace. I think that's a big piece of this, is saying, yes, it's like this now, but it's not like this forever. And even if it was like this forever, there are other pieces of this that can get us through it, you know? So, uh, I, I see that it can create a little bit of distance though inside of a relationship, right? No, and nobody talks about this kind of stuff either, right? Nobody, and this is all stuff that's behind closed doors that I tell everybody. I make this joke. I think my favorite couples are the ones that are out there so just like giddy and happy, and they look like they have the perfect life, but really they have a body hidden in the backyard, you know? And that to me is the piece of things that a lot of people kind of forget sometimes, I think.
Mhm.
um, and I really want people to kind of understand and see that there is a possible way for them to be able to get through it. So if they do end up actually if they go in and see a couples therapist or whatever it may be, then what does that look like for them trying to actually proceed forward their with their therapy?
It also so one thing I want to make sure I add also, it's also when we look at where is it coming from too, because sometimes
Okay.
when we look at that message of what is that performance aspect, where am I getting that model from, where is that coming from? A lot of times it's coming from either they see something on social media or they see it in pornography or they see something aspect of that. So that's one of the things I look at. Where's this message coming? What is that sexual message? And when we go into the therapy process, that's one of the things that I start with some of my pre-screens is
And
getting that.
whenever you're saying sexual message, Mark, can you maybe give me a little bit of a definition on that? Are you talking about what it is that we tell ourselves or what it is that we're perceiving?
So one example would be, how did you first learn about sex? How did that come about? Like, did you learn it from a book? Did you learn it from pornography? Did you learn it from one of your friends? Did you hear it from so those underlying messages of what it means that sex is and how that message kept being pushed forward is that aspect, because that's where some of our conceptual aspects of it is that consistent or skewed messaging that can
Mm.
kind of change our viewpoints, which is another reason why sometimes, especially with erectile dysfunction, I'm starting to see erectile dysfunction medications being used with younger and younger and younger individuals. Normally I didn't see it, 10, 15 years ago, when I would do my intake and I would get their list of their medications, I wouldn't see like a Cialis or Viagra in anyone that wasn't under, 40 or older. And now I'm seeing it in 30s and I've seen it in 20s. And it's not just a one occasional thing. I'm seeing this start to be more consistent. And typically we wouldn't start seeing some of this stuff, as I said, typically until 40s or older.
Sure.
So messages, where is those messages coming from? How is it sinking in? How am I comparing myself to somebody else? And is that stacking up to those um, concepts? And how is it being reinforced? And a
Interesting.
lot of times it is from media, whether that's movies or television or social media or internet or something like that, where it's that reinforcement that's not always healthy. And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors to it.
Of
Yeah.
course. Absolutely. There's always smoke and mirrors to that, right? And I think that's some people that, I mean, I hate to burst anybody's bubble here, but there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with that, you know? And I think what you just said is such a really important thing, is for us to be able to go back and understand, how did we learn about this? What did we tie to sex? Did we tie emotion? Did we tie gratitude? We did we tie, like, what did we tie to that? Where did we learn about it? How do we understand it? How does it actually interoperate in our lives? And I think that's a really great place to start for a lot of people. And I think I think what's really interesting to me is how multifaceted this is. And I don't think people really understand it. And I think that a lot of people instantly go on that Cialis or that Viagra because number one, we are a society of instant gratification. Like, let's be very honest about that. I know it. And that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, was so that way people could understand the principle of actually getting to performance. And in this way, we're actually, ironically, talking about how to get to performance, you know? But I think it's kind of an interesting piece of what you said, that there are individuals now that are younger, that are
Mhm.
coming in with this type of medication. And Mark, I'm just very curious. Do you think it's because we've kind of become more of a social media society? Do you think there's more pressures? Like, where do you think that could be coming from? Is it a true medical need, or is it more of, maybe we just need a little bit more, or sorry, less stigma put against sex?
The majority of the people that I have worked with where we have been able to get through, one of the homework assignments I always give them is just to have fun. Stop having this preconceived notion of what it needs to be. And when they give themselves that permission to have their hair down and kind of have fun with it, that can help. So, from some aspects that I've seen, it's not being asked the right questions by their providers, or they hear it from a family member or a friend that said,
Got
I
it.
went on this medication, it helped, and not having any follow-up questions. That topic of sex being taboo and having this heavy stigma attached to it means that a lot of times we deflect from those questions and
Sure.
deflect from that. It's so much easier to throw a pill at it instead of, you know what, I'm just going to have fun with my partner. And if we end up laughing and giggling and having a great time and cracking jokes and just having fun, the number of occasions where I've had somebody take that pressure off themselves and they come back and they report in afterwards at their next session, they're like, oh, yeah, well, I was able to have sex successfully this last time. I'm like, oh, okay, what changed? I just did what you said. We just stopped putting pressure on ourselves and we started having fun. And I'm like, okay, great. And
That's
then in my head,
fantastic.
sometimes in my head, I'm like, why didn't you do that before? Well, it's because of the
Mm,
messaging.
of course. And that makes even more sense now with what it is that you're talking about, the messaging. So what you're saying is the messaging is really what it is that it's a culmination of things. It's what it is that we're taking in from society. It is what it is that we may be looking at and enjoying in our private time. And then also it's the pressure that we put on ourselves inside the relationship to perform. So you're telling me, Mark, that a lot of solution to this. You know, I've heard the that old saying, I think it's the solution to pollution is dilution, right? And maybe not exactly falls in line here, but I think what you're saying kind of follows that path a little bit of stop concentrating it. Just let it happen. And why I think my question lies here is, why is it so hard for people to do that? Like, you even said it. You're like, why didn't you just try that? Is it again, does it go back to the messaging?
In looking at it, one of the things that one aspect I've seen is when we're younger, especially for men in particular, it's very physically driven. But as and this is one I would say is one of the positives with our culture going, that the message, like when I was growing up, they would say, men don't cry, men don't do this. It's all about physicality. And now some of the messaging has been, it's okay for you to have an emotional expressions. It's okay for that. So when we look at that shift, it's almost like a short circuit, because it's like, okay, it's okay for me to have these emotions, but I'm in my field right now. And because I'm in my fields, then this is ended up happening. And because this is that, so it's like this very complicated messaging that's going
Yeah.
on.
It's that feedback loop consistently going back and around with negative
Yeah.
reinforcement.
And it's okay for all that to happen as long as you take the pressure off and accept that it's okay for that, for you to have those feelings. Because
Yeah.
constantly, one of the best things I hear all the time, the best sex that's ever happened is where I'm emotionally connected with my partner. I'm in that emotional connection, best sex I've ever had. And a lot of times it's not even leading to orgasm. Most of the time it is, but a lot of times that's how it goes. Even with women, typically, if we're looking at more on the like a heterosexual type of relationship, the majority of the nerve endings that allow women to orgasms on is not in the vaginal canal. It's actually the vulva. It's the clitoris and everything is on
Everything
the
else.
outside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so having that deeper connection where they relax more, they tend to be a little bit more orgasmic because they're allowing themselves to relax.
Sure.
With men too, it's like, okay, I'm having these connections with my partner that lasts longer and it's more in depth, and it just feels good to kind of have fun kind of deal.
Yeah. So you're just saying have fun. Don't have sex, have fun.
And if it's not working that one moment, it's okay. Well, if it's consistent, then yeah, you go get checked by a doctor. I mean, even when people come in and talk to me about things, it's sort of like, okay, well, one of the things we always look at is, how long has this been going on? Is this only happened one time and you only had sex once in the last 6 months? Okay, are we looking at the frequency issue and because there was something else going on and you didn't connect it? Or are we talking you're having, in the last month and a half, you've had sex, 30 times, and all 30 times you're having some type of issue with performance? Then, okay, maybe we need to get always, the very first thing I always ask them when they come in is, have you been checked out by a medical practitioner? Because if it's organic, if it's physical in nature, I can't impact that.
Sure. Of course. And again, the understanding of that mind-body connection. They can operate individually, but whenever they do start talking to each other, which they always do, that's whenever you come in and you're saying, okay, wait a minute, let's stop this negative feedback loop. Let's stop this negative reinforcement, and let's actually just let go. Right? Let's let go. And but what about that person that might be extremely stressed? I mean, they are just they don't know down from up right now. Everything in their life seems so extremely hard, and like they don't see a path forward. What about that individual that might be inside of a relationship or marriage or domestic partnership, whatever it may be? What about that individual? What is it that you would suggest to them
In one of
that's
my
having these erectile dysfunction issues? Sorry, just to
right,
be a little bit more on the
yeah.
nose.
So one of the trauma specializations that I work with is polyvagal theory, which works on that nervous system aspect of, just if we force relaxation, the body will follow, that concept. So there's a element that we get that is commonly called baby's breath. Looks ridiculous, but it really does work, where you take a huge deep breath, you kind of tense everything up, then you take another deep one, and when you let it all out, you just literally go flat. You just let everything kind of flop down.
Love that.
Yeah, well, it tricks that vagus nerve system to kind of relax for a minute. And the more you do it, the longer it lasts. And I use other techniques as well, like using some mindfulness exercises, and depending on the need of that particular client, we always have to adapt theory with the need specifically for that client. And so when you are having someone who's having these difficulties right now, I kind of listen to what their symptomology is, what's that presentation. And then
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite things to do is that baby's breath thing, where you just take a deep breath in and you just let it all come down. It's just allowing that pressure to come off, so to speak.
Mm, interesting.
Sometimes having a hard win, just a win period when it comes to it. So even if they're by themselves and they end up having some good erection quality, or they're able to achieve orgasm, but their erection quality might be lower, it's still a win. We have to start giving them wins in that mindset, in redefining what those wins. So a lot of those things I look at is, what is the message? What is the goal? What is the element that might be blocking? And what
Mm-hmm.
can we introduce to try to slowly give them a new anchor point? Because I like using that
Love
adage
that.
about throwing an anchor down. And when we have an anchor down, life is all about like high tides, low tides, all those things.
Of
And when
course.
we put an anchor down, it keeps us necessarily going too far out. We can
Got
control
it.
how much rope. We can throw more anchors down so we're not moving as much. But when we have no anchors, which typically a lot of times when people come in, they don't have anchors, or they don't know they can throw an anchor down. We
Mm-hmm.
just got to give them an anchor.
Okay, so anchors are good. That's really good to hear. That's a good piece of advice, honestly. Is it's okay to put things down so we don't move for a minute. We don't have to keep pushing to try to fix this, you know? So, Mark, I want to acknowledge the listeners sitting there thinking, okay, some of this sounds familiar, but I don't know what to do about it. I think you just gave us a really kind of cool little tool to use. But when someone comes to you with erectile dysfunction or the loss of desire, what, where do they start? Like, I know you said that you kind of started with their messaging, things of that sort. Where do they actually start trying to improve? What are things that you give them to do, or maybe to give to the audience today? Like, what is one thing that they could do immediately now to try to help?
It's really hard to do a one size fits all concept when it
Sure.
comes to the besides giving themselves grace, relaxing, having fun. If it keeps perpetuating, get evaluated. Because if there is a physical issue, sometimes when you wait too long, it makes it a lot harder to get it, that goalpost move. Seeing somebody who specializes in like sex therapy or sex education, the majority of the individuals who have some form of formal training,
Mm-hmm.
they, it's all talk therapy. From my perspective, all we do is talk. I don't want to see
Sure.
anything. I don't want to hear, whatever you bring in is verbal. I don't want anything else. I'll go to a doctor on that one.
Which,
They're, yeah.
yeah. And I think that's kind of like a misconception people have, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, where does that misconception come from? Is it because it has the word sex in the name? I mean, like, it's kind of crazy, right? That people would think you're like, okay, like, really, you should do this instead of that. Standing right there, that's wild, right? That's wild to me. And how unethical,
It
right?
is
Wildly.
100%. Yeah. The messaging probably comes from many, many different sources. I mean, the one I can think of right off the top of my head, pornography, because they had
Sure.
this one weird concept of, because it is you're dealing with a taboo, and then partly some of the aspects, that power dynamic aspect. I flat out, yeah, there is. I tell people all the time, no. Uh, when I was revamping my website, when my old website used to have uh, 5 myths and facts about sex therapy, and number one is you will keep your clothes on. I don't want to see it. The story hard. Stop. No, no, no. I
I
don't.
get
I
it.
don't. No,
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
totally understand. And unfortunately, I'm in massage therapy and people have hypersexualized my industry as well. And it's written into my intake form. This is a full draping practice. Anything other, you should not be here. And it's really sad that we have to tell society that. And again, mine comes from like that sexualization of my industry also comes from pornography, which is extremely unfortunate and really sad. But I think what's even more interesting is the fact that people still try to do it, even though they really understand like that's not why we're here. But if you want to tell me about why you're having this problem, then absolutely, right? Like, let's talk that through. Um, so I think the misconception, what I'm understanding, is that you deal with the mind.
Mhm.
The physicians deal with the body. And that's where people need to understand that the mind body connection is real, but they do operate individually. And whenever the body isn't quite, or the body's okay, then now we need to look at the mind. And then
Mhm.
whenever that mind piece starts rolling forward, then we actually start understanding that there is connection to the body.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand that. They instantly think, oh no, there is just something wrong with me, right? My hormones are off, or I'm too old, right? I
Mhm.
hate when people say that. I'm like, first of all, age is nothing but a number and how many times you've been around the sun. So I think age is just a convenient excuse personally. You're never too old for anything. So I'll jump off my soapbox there. I could keep going. But I feel like it's those two main things that people start instantly thinking, but they don't realize that there is actually a possibility that they could be working together. So let's say there's a listener listening right now, and they're realizing they've gone to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "You're fine. Your blood pressure is good. Like your blood counts look great. Everything looks good." At what point do they know that they need to come see you? At what point should they say, "Okay, it's time"?
With some of the medical practitioners that I work with, they will refer at that point. They'll say, here he is. He's been working on this for a while. We've talked to him. We know what his standards of practice are and stuff like that. That's one aspect. Uh, a lot of times also people will go out and just like research what they need, and they will kind of contact that way. Uh, it's when they've reached that line when they've said, I've gone as far as I can and I'm punishing myself more often than I'm succeeding, kind of deal. The other
Okay.
is, I've had this happen. So they'll come to me for just like generalized anxiety issues or depression or something that does not initiate sexually. And then as we've progressed, because I am a professional counselor. I mean, sex therapy is one of my specializations.
Of
So a lot
course.
of people come to me that have originally has nothing to do with sex. And then all of a sudden it comes up because they've had this, because they are ashamed, and they never really thought of them being connected until that moment. But So it's very difficult to kind of give like one solid blanket because there's so many little pieces that kind of
So are you saying that the individual is the one that knows when they should come in? Is that what you're saying?
they are. I've had it. The majority of what comes to me is more individual aspect,
Hmm.
followed
Sure.
next by the partner, and then last their medical provider. Because I can
Got it.
tell you, the majority of the people I see that have come to me right off the bat, they haven't even talked to their doctors yet that there's an issue.
Interesting. Got it. So, I
Yeah,
mean, that's good. At least they're starting to make moves, right? So you brought up the partner, and this is the last thing because we're starting to run out of time here. But I mean, Mark, I could pick your brain all day. But let's talk about the partner, the spouse, or the friend who's listening right now and thinking, I know someone that needs to hear this. What should they do? How do they even start the conversation without making it worse?
this is where communication that's in the relationship is already key, and understanding that there's not blame on there, because it becomes into one of those things where it's like a snake eating its own tail. You get it started without some kindness and compassion in it, then that is when it starts going through. One of the concepts when I was learning to become a sex therapist is this concept of that it's the implicit model, and the P implicit is for permission. So we ask permission, we ask consent. Like, hey, I would really like to talk to you about something, and if and you just start off something light, like, I noticed the last time that we were trying to be intimate that you were really being hard on yourself because you had a moment where your libido was not matching up with what your body was functioning. It doesn't even matter the person's gender identity in this case, because it can start. It's a lot more evident when it comes to men having this issue, because a lot of times with the person who's on the receiving end, if all things out, you just get some lubricant and it kind of
Hmm.
balances out, and at least in some people's minds that way, even though it is a lot more complex. But it's the one that it's a lot easier to see
Of
in that
course, I was
case.
about to say it's way more visual.
Right. Yes. It's so the partner can kind of do that P part, that permission, asking, hey, can we talk about this? And it's okay for the person to say, you know what, I really don't want to talk about this right now, but you should always follow up. Don't push it under the rug. Because if you push it under the rug, it eventually too many things get pushed under the rug and you get this big lump in the rug. And
And
then,
now it's almost impossible to ignore it, right? Like it's now at that point we're building resentment, and that's not good.
or
That's a
self-hatred.
horse. Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the, I think it's like one of the, it's either 4 or 5 horsemen in relationships, right? Is resentment. And that's one thing that we don't want inside of a relationship. So it sounds to me that if somebody knows somebody that might be dealing with this, I think maybe a good first step would be like, hey, I heard this podcast. It might be kind of good for you to listen to, right? Send it over. Maybe drop a little breadcrumb here and there. Shameless self promotion, but like send it their direction. And I think maybe that second time, that next piece should be that permission. The question of, hey, is it okay that I talk to you about that? And then kind of see where it goes from there. If they say no, I've been through a lot of therapy. My therapist has always said, no's are no's for the moment until
Okay.
you're willing to talk about it. And so at that point, we have to wait. Don't keep pushing it, right? Don't shove it under the rug either. And also we need to have that grace for our partner too. So I think it's just a beautiful message, Mark, and I really appreciate your time today. And I would love to be able to try to connect people with you. So where can they find you if they want to learn more or connect with your practice specifically?
They can either go on to my website, which is www.brighthopecounselingllc.com. That's my website. There are a lot. The other thing is, I might not always be the best person, or my schedule might be pretty full. Uh, a lot of times I'll have people reach me and I'm not the best fit, but I tried my hardest to work with other clinicians that might be a good fit. So,
Beautiful.
the other thing if you go to my website, you can see what professional organizations I belong to. One of them, several of them are based on like sex education, sex therapy aspects. And a lot of those, they have directories that they can go and see. So if like right now, I'm only licensed in the state of Georgia. So if they're not in Georgia, I can't see them, but they can go over and look
Got it.
at like ASEC. ASEC is the American Associations of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. That's one organization I belong to. They have very extensive directories. And not only is it all throughout the US, but also in Canada. And there's like 2 other countries that's eluding my head right
Amazing.
now. But they can go there and they can look and see if they have a good fit. But if they're in Georgia, or sometimes if they can shoot me a message. And if I can't help them, I might be able to find a name, or I can connect them to another organization or something that
Beautiful.
kind of helps. But they can go to my website, they can take a look, and they can always reach out to one of the other organizations I belong to.
Amazing. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I think the work that you do is it is beyond the point of needed. I appreciate the work that you do. And I'm really sure that this episode in general is going to help shift that stigma of what it is that you do. And I cannot wait to hear about that. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great.
Here's what I want to leave you with. We open this episode talking about what happens when sex disappears from your life. And I do not just mean the physical act. I mean everything that goes with it. The confidence, the connection, the sense of who you are when the part of you goes quiet. What Mark showed us today is that this is not something you have to accept as your new normal. Erectile dysfunction is not a life sentence. Trauma does not get the final word here. And the silence, the pretending it's not happening, that it's this thing that is actually keeping you stuck. If you're a veteran dealing with something you have not told anybody about, help exists. And it does not look like what you think it looks like either. If you're someone whose intimate life has been hijacked by stress, trauma, or something you can't even name, there is a path forward. And it starts with one honest conversation. You are stronger than your depression. You are stronger than your anxiety. You are stronger than your fear. Mark has said this, and I believe it. And I need you to believe it too. If this episode hit home for you, send it to the person who needs to hear it. This is how we break the silence. Not with some massive campaign, just one person sharing one conversation with another person who's struggling. I'm Bradley Morgan. This is Pain to Performance, and I'll see you on the next one. Before we take off, one quick housekeeping thing. This podcast is for education and conversation only. I'm in no way a licensed therapist, doctor, wizard, and this show is not a substitute for care from a qualified professional. If something today made you think of someone you know, go ahead and do them a favor and send this episode their way. Pain is rarely a solo experience, and a good conversation is better shared. And if you're enjoying the show, make it official. Follow, subscribe, leave a review. It helps more than you realize and keeps this conversation going. Remember, the hardest part of Pain to Performance is learning how to listen. Now, I'll be here, same place, next play, and I can't wait to welcome you in.